Okay, so we're now at Canto 5. So I just ended from the first enclosure down to the second circle. Enclosure is a bit misleading there. The souls are not trapped or walled in to their sections of hell. They're there because psychologically that's where they should be. They're not actually imprisoned. They're there because they want to be there. They're there because that's their natural place in the universe. So it's così discesi del cerchio primaio giù nel secondo. Thus, I descended from the first circle down to the second. But Mandelbaum, the translator, wants a word there for fill out his line, so he says enclosure. It gives it a misleading implication. So I descended from the first circle down to the second. That which girdles less space, but grief more great, that goes to weeping. Well, when you read the Divine Comedy in a modern edition, you immediately get this diagram, and maybe 20 diagrams, and your professor shows you the diagrams, and you know that hell is a cone, but obviously the first readers had to figure this out. And Dante is telling us here that the second circle has less of a circumference, and if you extrapolate that means the shape of hell is a narrowing cone. And it's symbolically significant because the lower you go, the less freedom you have, the less space you have, right? You're more and more confined until when he reaches the bottom of hell, the souls are frozen in ice. They can't even move. They can't communicate. They have no contact with any other creature. There, dreadful Minos stands, gnashing his teeth, examining the sins of those who enter. He judges and assigns as his tale twines. I mean that when the spirit born to evil appears before him, it confesses all, and he, the connoisseur of sin, can tell the depth in hell appropriate to it, as many times as Minos wraps his tale around himself that marks the sinner's level. So Minos was a legendary king of Crete. He was the king, remember, whose wife fell in love with a bull and had the Minotaur and so forth. Dante develops this idea, here's Michelangelo's interpretation, that Minos has a tail. He's the judge of the dead, but something like a bull, he has a tail. And the way he indicates the circle that the soul has to go down to is by winding his tail around his body. If he winds it around 3 times, he goes to the third circle, 4 times, fourth circle, and so on. So a kind of half-human, half-animal judge. So the souls have to go and tell everything to Minos, and then he decides what appropriate level they should end up in. Connoisseur is a little bit has a wrong implication there. It sounds like he likes sin, a connoisseur of sin. It means expert. Conoscitor in Italian means an expert, someone that knows about sin, not necessarily. Connoisseur today, if you're a connoisseur of fine tea, it means you like tea. Not only know about it, but you like it. Always there is a crowd that stands before him. Each soul in turn advances towards that judgment. They speak and hear and then are cast below. So Minos challenges Dante again. He says, "O you who reach this house of suffering, be careful how you enter. Whom you trust, the gate is wide, but do not be deceived." At which Virgil says, "Vuosi così colà dove si puote ciò che si vuole e più non dimandare." The same magic password, and of course then Minos allows them to continue. New notes of desperation have begun to overtake my hearing. Now I come where mighty lamentation beats against me. If you notice in the translation, also in the Italian, Dante shifts to the present. This is the historical present. It's a present tense that's used to describe past events, but when you go to the present tense, it's supposed to give you a kind of feeling that you're watching the events take place before your very eyes. So writers use the historical present when they want to create a greater sense of drama to what they're describing. So I come, son venuto, I have come, and to a place where mighty lamentation beats Per quote, present tense, against me. Now, it doesn't go on forever. It's just to set the scene, before our eyes. It's like we're watching it ourselves in the present tense. I reached a place where every light is muted, which bellows like the sea beneath a tempest when it is battered by opposing wind. So the situation, the environment, if you want to say it that way, in this part of hell is wind. Tremendously strong wind. The hellish hurricane, which never rests, drives on the spirits with its violence. Wheeling and pounding, it harasses them. When they come up against the ruined slope, then are their cries and wailing and lament, and there they curse the force of the divine. So the souls are punished by being blown in a strong wind. And there's a ruined slope. I don't know how much of this I should take time to talk about, but there's a place where there's a kind of a collapse to the wall of that part of the circle. And when they see that collapsed rock, they lament even more. Where did the collapsed rock come from? When Christ died, according to the Bible, there was an earthquake. And throughout hell, we'll find there's evidence of this earthquake that occurred at the time of Christ's death. And so after his death, of course, he came to harrow hell. And so the souls, when they see this, are reminded of the fact that other souls were saved at the time of Christ's death, but of course they were left behind. I learned that those who undergo this torment are damned because they sinned within the flesh, subjecting reason to the rule of lust. So this is an early canto, and Dante tells us explicitly right at the beginning what the sin is. Later, he'll never tell us. Like the sin of Ulysses, you've got to try to figure that out, and there are lots of people that don't agree as to what the sin of Ulysses is. So as he develops his poem, he becomes more and more indirect in explicitly defining what the sin of each part of hell is. But here he tells us, right? It's lust. Subjecting reason to the rule of lust. So if you remember Plato's idea of the human personality is like a chariot, and the horses are the emotions, and the driver is reason. So subjecting reason to lust or to emotion is to put the horses in charge of where the chariot is going, and totally out of control. So again, it's a kind of a hierarchy thing. You put what should be the normal, healthy relationship of reason controlling the emotions. You let emotions control reason. You put emotions in control or above reason. Subjecting means putting below reason to the rule, to the governance of lust. And as in the cold season starlings' wings bear them along in broad and crowded ranks, so does that blast bear on the guilty spirits. Now here, now there, now down, now up, it drives them. There is no hope that ever comforts them, no hope for rest, and none for lesser pain. And just as cranes in flight will chant their lays, their songs, arraying their long file across the air, so did the shades I saw approaching, borne by that assailing wind, lament and moan, so that I asked him, Master, who are those who suffer punishment in this dark air? So two rather beautiful similes describing the souls in this part of hell. They're like starlings, which are small, dark birds that fly in huge flocks, like starlings. And they're also like cranes, which of course don't have to describe a crane to a Chinese, right? Flying in these beautiful long strands across the sky. So two images to describe the situation of the souls being borne by this wind. Virgil says, the first of those about whose history you want to know, my master then told me, once ruled as empress over many nations. Her vice of lust became so customary that she made license licit in her laws to free her from the scandal she had caused. So that's a pretty hard thing to figure out, made license licit. She had made legal the exception of committing incest, right? Incest. She had fallen in love with her own son, and to excuse this, she changed the law to make incest legal. She is Semiramis, of whom we read that she was Ninus' wife and his successor. She held the land the Sultan now commands. So she was a legendary empress of Syria. That other spirit killed herself for love, and she betrayed the ashes of Zacchaeus. Now you've got to know your Aeneid to know who this is. Zacchaeus was Dido's husband, remember, who was murdered by his brother in Tyre. So this is Dido. He sees Dido here. Now, question, Dido committed suicide. Why is she with the lustful rather than down with the suicides, much lower in hell? Well, Dante seems to be looking at motive rather than the actual deed itself. The motive for her suicide was her love for Aeneas. The wanton Cleopatra, everybody knows who she was. She was sort of, infamous lover, mistress to Julius Caesar and also Mark Antony. The wanton Cleopatra follows next. Helen, we know who she is, for whose sake so many years of evil had to pass. See great Achilles, that really is odd to us, but there was a legend, you don't find it in Virgil, you don't find it in Homer, that towards the end of the war, Achilles fell in love with Polyxena, who was Priam's daughter, and he went to Troy. He was going to change sides in the war. He went to Troy to marry her, and then, of course, got shot in the heel by Paris and died. The great Achilles, who finally met love in his last battle. See Paris, lover of Helen. Tristan, famous knight, lover of medieval legend. And he pointed out and named to me more than 1,000 shades departed from our life because of love. No sooner had I heard my teacher name the ancient ladies and the knights. Notice how he refers to these characters from classical legend and from classical history. He calls them ladies and knights. That's typical anachronism, going against historical accuracy. So we find in Chaucer's Knight's Tale, Theseus, the king of Athens, is treated like a medieval king, and Palamon and Arcita are treated like medieval knights. Amalea is treated like a medieval lady. So no sooner had I heard my teacher name the ancient ladies and the knights than pity seized me. Pietà, there's that word, mi giunse. And I was like a man astray, smarrito. That's the word that Dante uses right at the beginning of the poem. Nel mezzo del cammin di nostra vita, mi ritrovai per una selva scura, che la dirita via era smarrita, lost. Right? So whatever that was that made him lost in the dark wood may be something that relates to this being lost through the sin of love or lust. My first words, poet, I should willingly speak with those two. This is typical of each canto, typical of each encounter Dante has in the all three volumes of his poem. There's a kind of description of the overall situation, a description of the overall group of people, and then one or two or three are singled out for a conversation with Dante. So we get both the cast of thousands, and then we also get individual portraits. So I should willingly speak with those two who go together there and seem so lightly carried by the wind. Paien si al vento esser leggeri. Lightly. Now that could be good. It could mean, they're not buffeted so heavily by the wind. It could also mean that they're light and therefore they're blowing more violently. It could mean both. And he to me you'll see when they draw closer to us, and then you may appeal to them by that love which impels them. So Dante makes it very clear here, the wind is the love. The wind symbolizes their passion, right? They will come. No sooner had the wind bent them towards us than I urged on my voice, O battered souls, if one does not forbid it, speak with us. One, capital, capital O means God. If God does not forbid, speak with us. Both Dante and other souls in hell seem reluctant to use the name of God. Not appropriate down there. Even as doves, when summoned by desire, borne forward by their will, move through the air with wings uplifted, still to their sweet nest, those spirits left the ranks where Dido suffers, approaching us through the malignant air. So powerful had been my loving cry. So first starlings, then cranes, and now doves, right? All of these bird images, and they become increasingly more beautiful and increasingly more positive, right? Doves, well, it's the bird of Venus, right? It's the symbol of Venus, and so it is associated with sexual love, but doves are peaceful, beautiful birds. Quali colombe, dal desio chiamate, con le ali alzate, ferme a dolce nido, vegnon per l'aere, dal voler portate, cotali uscire dallo schiero vedido, a noi venendo, pur aere meligno, si forte fu l'affettuoso grido. Some of the most beautiful lines in the whole poem describing just this simile that the souls, like doves, flying back to their nests, come towards Dante. Well, one thing in this passage, notice how he refers to Dido here. It's almost like a challenge. It's almost like Dante is saying, Virgil wrote a great love story about Aeneas and Dido. I can also write a great love story. This one is going to be Paolo and Francesca, right? So it's almost like a challenge, saying, look, I can do, in a very brief passage, what Virgil did with Book 4 of the Aeneid. O living being, gracious and benign, who through the darkened air have come to visit our souls that stain the world with blood. If he who rules the universe were friend to us, then we should pray to him to give you peace, for you have pitied our atrocious state. Well, the commentators have pointed out that, there's a hypotheticality, if I may use the word, a pathetic uncertainty in Francesca's statement, right? If he who rules the universe were friend to us, subjunctive, he's not. He's not a friend. We should pray to him, but we can't pray to him, to give you peace. And that word pace occurs twice in this passage, and it's pathetic because that's the one thing that Francesca will never have. Remember, she's being blown in this whirlwind, in this hurricane. So she will never be at peace. And she says, if God were a friend to us, we would pray to him to give you what we can never have, peace. Whatever pleases you to hear and speak will please us too, to hear and speak with you now while the wind is silent in this place. The land where I was born lies on the shore to which the Po, together with the waters that follow it, descends to final, and then Mandelbaum translates rest, but if you look over at the Italian, it's pace. It's the same word again, peace. Descends to final peace. So it's as though she is obsessed with the idea of being at peace, because, of course, she will never be at peace. Then we get this syllogism, right? A syllogism is a logical argument in three stages. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal, right? That's a syllogism. So there's a three-part statement here as well. Love that can quickly seize the gentle heart took hold of him because of the fair body taken from me. How that was done still wounds me. So a thing to mention here, gentle, that's not such a great translation. You might think, well, that means it's kind, not cruel. But actually, gentile in Dante's time, in the Italian of Dante's time, also meant of noble birth. That's probably what it means here. Love that can quickly seize the noble heart, the heart of a person of the upper classes. Because according to courtly love theory, peasants did not fall in love. Only people of higher social rank could be involved in courtly love. So love that quickly can seize the gentle heart took hold of him because of the fair body taken from me. Now we'll find that when she talks about what it was about Paolo that attracted her, it was his piacere, his beauty, his handsomeness. So it's clear that the attraction here is a physical one, right? It's an attraction based on the physical beauty of the two people involved. Love that can quickly seize the noble heart took hold of him because of the fair body taken from me. How that was done still wounds me or offends me. So how it was done refers to the fact that Giovanni, Francesca's husband, killed Francesca and Paolo when they were making love. He surprised them in bed, right? He had, learned that they were lovers, and he knew that they were going to meet. Said, "I'm going to be out of town," snuck back, and killed them as they were committing adultery. So it's not only the brutality of the murder that wounds her, it's the fact that being killed in the midst of sin, there was no hope to repent. There was no hope to ask forgiveness for the sin. And you remember in Hamlet, when Hamlet comes upon Claudius, and Claudius is praying, he says, "Pat, I could do it now." He's got his rapier out. And then he thinks, no. He says, if I kill him now, he's praying, his soul will go straight to heaven. He says, I'll kill him later when he's drunk or when he's in bed with Gertrude, and make sure he doesn't have time to show any religious penitence. Love that releases no beloved from loving took hold of me so strongly through his beauty that, as you see, it has not left me yet. Or perhaps he, the Italian is ambiguous, could be he has not left me yet. So here's the conclusion. These are the minor premises. This is the major premise. This is the conclusion now. Love led the two of us unto one death. Hyena waits for him who took our life. So it seems like this conclusion is the inevitable result of these two first premises. If love seized him because of my beauty, and if love seized me because of his handsomeness, love then destroyed us, right? Love led the two of us unto one death. Hyena is the area of the very lowest circle of hell where those people who betray members of their family are punished. And it's named for Cain, right? The brother of Abel, the son of Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman. They had these two sons. Cain became jealous of Abel and killed him. So Cain was the first murderer. So Giovanni, of course, his punishment, she takes some consolation in the fact that his punishment will be greater than theirs. He'll be at the very bottom of the hell with those who betrayed or murdered members of their own family. These words were borne across from them to us. When I had listened to those injured words, I bent my head and held it low until the poet asked of me, "What are you thinking?" So injured words, you've got to stop and ask yourself,
Injured souls.
Injured souls, sorry. Injured words, where did I get that? When I listened to those injured souls, injured by whom? Well, by Giovanni, obviously. Maybe also in the sense of Dante the Pilgrim's interpretation of the situation, by God. He's still thinking maybe these souls do not deserve the punishment which they are being given. When I listened to these injured souls, I bent my head and held it low until the poet asked of me, "What are you thinking?" When I replied, my words began, "Alas, how many gentle thoughts, how deep a longing had led them to the agonizing pass," to this agonizing situation. Then I addressed my speech again to them, and I began Francesca. So now we know that Dante Pilgrim recognizes this couple. He was only 10 years old at the time that Francesca and Paolo were killed, but it was a famous story in northern Italy. And so he knows the story, and he knows her, and he addresses her by name, Francesca. Your afflictions move me to tears of sorrow and of pity. But tell me, in the time of gentle sighs, with what and in what way did love allow you to recognize your still uncertain longings? Notice how Dante says it's love that's involved here. Love is one of the players in this drama. We'll talk more about that in a moment. And she to me, there is no greater sorrow than thinking back upon a happy time in misery. And this your teacher knows. That's kind of puzzling. This your teacher knows. What is she referring to there? Dante's teacher in this context is Virgil, right? So how does Virgil know about looking back on a happy time in a time of sorrow is so painful? Well, you can say he's now in limbo, and previously he was a famous and prosperous poet when he was alive. Or maybe she's thinking, and this is what I think, of the first beautiful line of the second book of the Aeneid, where after Dido asks Aeneas to tell the story of the fall of Troy, he says, "In fandum regina jubes renovare dolorem." Unspeakable, O queen, you order me to renew sorrow. You order me to renew unspeakable sorrow. Because in telling, of course, the story of the fall of Troy, Aeneas has to go back through that all over again. In any case, it's kind of a puzzling, and this your teacher knows, e ciò sal tuo dottore. Yet if you long so much to understand the first root of our love, then I shall tell my tale to you as one who weeps and speaks. One day, to pass the time away, we read of Lancelot, how love had overcome him. We were alone, and we suspected nothing. So the two of them are by themselves reading the romance of Lancelot. And time again that reading led our eyes to meet and made our faces pale, and yet one point alone defeated us. When we had read how the desired smile was kissed by one who was so true a lover, this one, Paolo, who never shall be parted from me, while all his body trembled, kissed my mouth. Quando leggemmo il disiato riso esser basciato da cotante amante, questi che mai da me non fia diviso, la bocca mi baciò tutto tremante. So there's a beautiful kind of contrast there between the literary, imaginary situation and the actual situation. The desired smile, right? That's a periphrasis. That's a circumlocution for the mouth, right? When we read how the il disiato riso was kissed, he kissed me on la bocca. La bocca is just the normal term for mouth, right? So it's a kind of contrast between the fantasy and the real. The fantasy of a love affair and a romance, and the reality of a married man and a woman making love. Galeotto fu libro e chi lo scrisse. A Gaio. Gaio was the go-between. Was his name in Italian comes to mean pander or pimp. It's kind of like what happens with the character Pandarus in Chaucer's Troilus and Cressida. The word pander in modern English, which is taken from his name, means someone that gets women for other men, a pimp. So a pimp, indeed, that book. And he who wrote it, too, that day we read no more. Quel giorno più non vi leggemmo avanti. So it's a beautiful way to, there again, of course, it's a kind of, way to avoid, then we had sex. If it were a movie, the camera would pan to the wall, and then it's sort of, well, that's what happened. Dante's not going to give us a description, obviously. It's very beautiful. Quel giorno più non vi leggemmo avanti. And while that one spirit said these words to me, the other wept. Notice Paolo never says anything, right? Reminds me of the situation of Ulysses and Diomedes, where Ulysses speaks, but his companion Diomedes is silent. Or Ugolino and Ruggieri. Ugolino speaks, but Ruggieri is silent. There's these three episodes which seem very similarly patterned. And we'll talk more about that later, perhaps. In any case, and while that one spirit said these words to me, the other wept, so that because of pity I fainted, as if I had met my death. Cum io morisse. So this is the most emphatic reaction that Dante Pilgrim has to any of the scenes that he witnesses, any of the sinners that he meets in the Inferno. I fainted as if I had met my death. E cadi come corpo morto cade. That's a beautiful line. And I fell then as a dead body falls.